Hey everyone, today I'm here with Executive Pastor Ed, and Ed was nice enough to support the brand when we did the Pro Police video, and we had some amazing conversations about what he does, and I'd love for him to be on, and I'm happy he's here today, and so he's going to give a quick intro, talk about his church a little bit, and we'll go from there and just have a great discussion.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. Shelter Cove's just a non-denominational church in Modesto, California. It really just is the standard evangelical. That means it believes in the Bible, believes in a personal relationship with Jesus, believes that we do need to share our faith, and believes that, of course, Jesus is the only way to heaven. It's the standard, normal, independent church. As far as what I do, I'm the CEO. I'm kind of like the executive guy that kind of runs everything. Everything reports to me, that kind of stuff. And I've been doing this a long time. This is my third large church. And when we say large, we're talking about over 1,000 plus. And Shelter Cove runs anywhere from 2,000 to 3,000 folks every weekend in any given month. I'm also a chaplain. I've been a chaplain for 25 years with police departments, anywhere from the street patrol to canine to SWAT units to narcotics to the FBI. So I've done all sorts of stuff. I currently work with a group in Washington, D.C. called Inlets, which is an anti-terrorism group. And I help police officers deal with stress. But it's not just police officers. It's DIA, CIA, Secret Service, all sorts of people call, because I write for Police One, an American military university, about the struggles that are in police work. Now, there's a lot of chaplains out there, my friend, that deal with victims. I deal with the police officer themselves and their families and what they deal with. So, and when I saw your ad, I thought, we should just support somebody who's going to put out a quality piece like that. I thought it was very balanced, very right. And so I bought a watch, even though I did not even need one, but I just wanted to support you.
Well, I appreciate that. It's interesting that I didn't know you were a chaplain. I had just the interview before this one was with a chaplain as well who works with the police force.
Oh, is that right?
And the victims, yeah. And he had some really, tough stories, and I was like, man, that's a tough job to see the things that you're seeing and going through. And
well, as far as I'm concerned, the stuff that I do is nothing compared to some of those narcotic raids I've been on. Rolling down the middle of a very, very icky part of town in the middle of the night with a van that doesn't have any windows and rolling out and just storming a house is just crazy scary. And some of the reactions of the bad guys are ridiculous. I have lots of stories about that. And I just think being a police officer is just an impossible job. That's all.
It is an impossible job. Today, it was always an impossible job, and today it's more of an impossible job than it's ever been. So it's twofold impossible now. It was impossible before to just be able to, live your life and manage expectations of having a family at home and then going out and taking these risks. But now we've compounded that by saying you're a villain in society and everyone hates you and we're trying to defund you and there's more people actively out to get you, even civilians that aren't criminals. And I mean, it's just become totally, totally impossible. I don't know why anyone today would have the guts to become a police officer, but it just makes me respect them more when they do.
Yeah, I agree. It's a calling. They talk about the scripture talking about Jesus calling you to help people. And that's typically what a pastor, does. But being a police officer is just as much a calling as far as like serving a community that doesn't really get it. I mean, I've been on so many ride-alongs where I thought it was over. I thought, okay, headline, pastor killed in a hail of bullets, because it snapped fast. I mean, it is so fast. Things happen so quickly, and you don't know who the bad guys are versus the good guys. And then when the political people kind of handcuff the police from doing things to protect themselves that I would do, they put themselves out there, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just, it's crazy. You just have to see it and feel it. Just go on a ride along. Just call your local. It's a civilian ride along. You can do it. I did it for a different reason, because a lot of police officers have weird schedules. They'll have 3 days on, 3 days off, 3 days on, and then they don't have a standard day off. So they can't do Bible study. They can't go to church. They can't go to small groups. So I took the church to the police officer on the street. And so I would go on the graveyard shift and run all night long with them. And whenever there was a dead time, we would talk about whatever they wanted to talk about. So I do think the personal life of a police officer is really stressful. And if you go on a ride along, you can just literally sign up and they'll take you on one of their shifts and they'll tell you what to do, what not to do. And it's really interesting.
Sorry, my dog just came in and plopped down on the floor.
I love dogs. I love dogs.
Yeah, she's a rescue, but she's just obsessed with me. She hasn't been feeling so great today, but she just came wandering in right in the middle of your story. Yeah, I agree that I think one of the biggest disconnects that people have nowadays, and one of the reasons that it's easy to vilify police, is because people are so detached from the reality of what goes on and what it's actually like to be in a situation. I've done martial arts my whole life, combat sports my whole life, and I've taught close quarter combat. And one of the things that I've noticed is anytime someone is watching something, they're a professional. They're the best in the world at it. But when they actually have to be in there and do it, they're always shocked by what it's actually like to be in the moment and have to perform. And so police are doing this with unknown variables every day, and it's impossible to account for these variables, and they're putting their lives at risk. They just want to get home to their family. So it's very interesting to see kind of like an armchair quarterback saying like, oh yeah, they could have just done this in that situation. They could have just done that. Well, you have a split second and you don't know if your life's on the line. So you obviously have a ton of firsthand experience seeing that. And it's great, to be able to talk with someone who's like, yeah, this is what it is. It changes.
Oh, totally. I mean, I'm no professional, but to tell you how long and how many times they actually got me my own bulletproof vest. I have my own to go on these things. And I'm telling you, there were times when the police officer I was with was wrestling some guy, big guy, on the ground. And some of these guys that they're dealing with are huge. They are big, and they're maybe high on PCP or drunk out of their mind. And then you got 2 or 3 people right next to you that you don't know if they're good or bad. And you don't know if you're going to get. It's crazy. I've seen dogs go chasing into the night and being all by yourself. And it literally in crowds of people that obviously are not too happy that you're there. I mean, it's, I personally think when you think that there's 800,000 law enforcement officers in the country and that each one of those guys interact with people, 10 to 30 times a day. So what's that? 2.4 million. And every day times 300 days, 350 days.
Yeah, there's over 60 million police interactions a year. That's the
how many?
Estimate. Over 60 million.
Yeah, and so if you have 80 or 90 bad ones go south, and even those are adjudicated in the police's favor most of the time, that say, well, what else did you expect them to do? Well, I think I've been to foreign countries. I've been to West Africa. I've been all over the world. And I can tell you right now, the police force here are not only trained the most, they're the most restricted. I mean, they really do. I think they do a great job of holding their temper. I don't know that I would if I was day in, day out dealing with people who are spitting in your face, lasers, throwing paint at you, iced water bottles flying through the air. I mean, I don't know how I would react to that.
No, it builds up, and then you get home and you turn on the news and it's about people hating the police. You open your phone and an app comes up about how police are bad and how you have to, you know what I mean? It just 24/7 if you're a police officer to be inundated with negativity toward what you're doing for your life. And like you said, it's a calling.
Yeah, it's a calling, and there's a lot of cops out there that have good nature. They take it in stride. I think a lot of wives, a lot of husbands of police officers are a little bit more worried about the whole thing because obviously they can't be there, and they're always worried if the officer is going to come home or have a cast on his arm from so many of them get hospitalized by some of this mess that never ends up in the mainstream media. And then the spouses are left going, and then the kids go to school and they hear that garbage from their silly teacher that happens to be a left winger and telling them, how cops are bad and all that stuff, which teachers do take liberty sometimes. And that's where the stress, and that's one reason why I'm going to teach this class in DC in October. in dealing with stress. But of course, I'm going to come from a Christian perspective, what I believe, the Bible and faith deals with. So.
Yeah. Do you mind me jumping in and asking you some questions right away about religion
Sure.
and kind of the state of where we are today? I
Sure.
feel like there's an increase in nihilism. I don't know if you want to talk about that. Maybe that connects kind of to everything we're seeing with the police as well and just society in general.
Well, I do think that the whole society has been affected by something that most people aren't even aware of, and that's 1962, when the Supreme Court, the Warren Court, which is the worst Supreme Court ever, decided that the Bible and in 63 prayer had to be taken out of public schools. They do an annual study of school, discipline issues. And back in 1962, the number one discipline issue that they had to deal with was running in the halls. Number two was putting gum underneath the desks. Well, by 1969, approximately 7 years after they pulled the Bible, prayer, 10 Commandments, and everything else out of public schools, the number one thing that they did on that exact same poll was rape. And so the point being is that all of a sudden the inner city school becomes a completely unethical, humanistic thing. Then comes along the 70s, of course, which was kind of a finding your own decade. The Beatles even came unglued during this decade. And then something started right at the tail end of the 79, 80 area. It's called Gothic. And that's this idea that everything is dark. Everything is bad. Everything is nihilistic. That is that there is no hope about life in general. And of course, the country, if you know your history, know that it became very materialistic, thinking that things, more cars, more houses, more whatever, is going to satisfy the American soul. And it didn't. And then you came into this hopelessness thing in the 90s. I mean, bands like In Excess and stuff like that just became, the darkness became mainstream. And I think nihilism in and of itself leads the human soul to be unhappy. And I don't mean unhappy like as in, oh, I'm just down a little bit today. I mean deeply bothered, deeply hurt, way down deep, where the fact is that you can't really do anything. And I think this dark, unhopeful, everything's against the standards like marriage, police, country, nationalism, flag, patriot, all that is being against because they've got to have some bad guy to be against. You know what I mean? And that nihilism stuff can lead to people, and that's, I think, one of the reasons why we have so much depression and suicide is because there's no hope. And the mainstream media and all those stupid TV shows that all go with it are adding to the fire.
Well, I'll be honest with you. The times I do suffer from depression or anxiety, because I've suffered from those things in my life, are the times I feel furthest away from God, if that makes sense. In other words, like I feel like I become disconnected from that idea or a relationship with something bigger than myself. And then the depression comes as a way to follow up. Because if you're not living for something bigger than yourself, then there is no truth in society. There is no reason to do anything. You live, you die. That's what it is. There's no meaning. There's no nothing. There's no value. And it quickly does affect your soul. And the times I'm more connected to that, I feel more peace with myself.
Well, that's because is my contention, and your listeners may not agree, but my contention is that we are made in Imago Dei. That means that we literally have a hole in our heart that is only connected, only fulfilled by a relationship with God. Now, I can argue different flavors of it, but the bottom line is that a relationship with God fulfills the human soul, and all of a sudden that peace you're talking about happens, and other things that come along are easier to deal with because I have a sincere, innate peace. Stephen Curtis Chapman, who's a Christian artist, music, he wrote a song called "There's Got to Be More to This Life Than Just Living and Dying." More to this life than just making it through the day. And if you don't have a purpose in life, whatever that is, in my opinion, you're going to head sooner or later to the nihilistic, the gothic, the dark side of human existence, and that's a mistake. And that's why I think secular humanism in the American schools don't really offer kids much. It's just all very self-centered, and I think that's a mistake.
Yeah, the people in my life, my experiences around religion, the people I've met, and all religions, that's not talking specifically, but the people I've met who have a kind of positive connection with God are the most peaceful, most calm. They just seem like there's something that has kind of mellowed them out, and that they know that everything is okay in the sense of like they have this thing that matters more. And even my own relationships in my life have been tougher when I try and put that on other people, that thing I'm looking for, as opposed to, or I'm looking for it in myself, because I can't fulfill it in myself. A human being can't fulfill it. It has to be something bigger. And so I think every problem, or a huge percentage of problems we see in society, stem from that. Like the notion that nowadays, I have conversations with people, and this is not rare, but a lot of my friends who identify more left are okay with abortion up until birth.
I know.
And I mean, it's just become almost like a common conversation to have with them when I say, when is the end? When is it not okay anymore? And they're like, it's never not okay. It's not my place up until birth. So I'm like, okay, so if a baby's about to come out, would you say we should have some laws at that point to protect the baby? No, we shouldn't have any laws. And that's become a mainstream view in terms of the people I talk to. And the only way I believe you can get to that point is by a complete denial of objective truth. And that is through nihilism, a denial of any type of God, any type of, and it's almost like you're trying to take the place of it. That's what I feel like's happening on a lot on the left nowadays. It's like the reason they have this moral superiority and this kind of stance where we know everything that's right, we're the moral authority on everything, if you're against us, you're evil, is because they're almost taking the place of that void that they have in their life, where if God doesn't exist, if there's no value in anything, then we are the new gods. Humans are God.
I think you hit it right on the money. The bottom line is somebody's on the throne of your heart. The question is it you, or is it the creator of the universe? If you believe in the meta-narrative, the worldview that there's a creator, well, then God has to be on the throne of your heart. And then all you have to do is find out, okay, what does God require of me? And the Bible shows that. So therefore, you learn the Bible and you accordingly apply it, right? I mean, that's the normal thing. I mean, in the Socratical method, in Socrates, my three favorite philosophers, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. You can always remember them. It's in that order, Spa. And the Bible is very Platonic in the sense that there's an ideal, heaven, and there's a form, earth. And that we are created with this sense, a need to be connected relationally with something bigger than just us. And if you're going to put secular humanism, self-centered, a person on your throne of your life, you will disappoint. It's bound to happen. And then where do you go? I always ask people this. This is a very simple 2 questions. I ask them all the time because people ask me, how are you so solid in what you're doing, and you've been doing it a long time? I say, well, very simple. I know, and here's my question. Do you know, and I would ask all your audience, do you know if you died tonight, if you'd go to heaven? Yes or no? Assuming you believe in it, believe that there's an afterlife. And when they say, well, I don't know, I'm not sure. Well, that's the difference. I am sure. Now, let's just say you did die, heaven forbid, and you stood before Jesus and he says, hey, why should I let you into my heaven? What would you say? And I've heard things like, well, because I'm kind of a good guy, or, well, I go to church, or, I haven't done anything really wrong. And I say, well, that's nifty. I used to think something like that, but it's got nothing to do with that. The only way you're going to get to heaven is if you have a personal relationship with Jesus. It's that simple. You can read that in the Bible. It's pretty simple. Start with the Gospel of John, and by the time you're done, you'll figure it out. And so I think that's what people are searching for. And when you're always searching, you're always unsettled. But once you've found what you're sure of, as you two once said, I still haven't found what I'm looking for. Well, that thing is, I think, a relationship with Christ. It will change your outlook on everything, from parenting to being an employee. from the whole idea of abortion, which I think is a national tragedy, to the whole idea of what's right and wrong. You mentioned absolutes. Well, where do you find absolutes? Part of it is in your soul, but the other part's right in the scripture. The Bible clearly shows. I don't know what happened here. Something happened.
No, you're still on.
Okay. I just got a weird screen. Anyway, so as far as I'm concerned, it all comes down to those two questions. If you died tonight, you going to heaven? And if you stood there and told them why, what's the reason? The only reason that works is the one that says, I believe and trust in Jesus for my salvation. And when you have that, well, then people, then your whole life becomes other-centered. That's why over the years, my wife and I have housed drug addicts, people who've been through nasty divorces, naval midshipmen that don't know where they got to go because they're TDY. So they've lived. I don't know that we've ever had anybody not live with us. And the point being is you got to start being other-centered. You got to start looking for people to help, because that's what Jesus did. And if you're sure of those two questions, then, well, then cops happen to be my niche. But there's lots of other people out there that need assistance too.
Well, I think that's such an interesting thing that you just said about being other-centric. And again, to bring it back to kind of like a reality, like not reality-based, but like a experience-based position. All anxiety, all OCD, and all depression comes from being, and I mean this as someone who suffered from these things, comes when you become self-consumed and you don't put things on other people. When you live for other people, and when you live to serve people, you take the attention off yourself. It's a lot harder to have those states of being. In other words, your anxiety tends to dissipate, your depression tends to dissipate because you're giving yourself to people. It's not about you. And so that's helped me tremendously in life. The second I get into that state and I go out and I do things for other people and I start putting things on other people, it cures my ailments in terms of my emotional ailments just start to dissipate. Do you think that, so, I mean, you kind of touched on this earlier, that there's, I don't want to say an attack on God, but I feel like to some extent there has been, and now even politicians are trying to get God removed. If it's mentioned anywhere, it should be removed. If there's anything that has to do with religion, it should be removed. And not only, it's no longer like, oh, you should have your personal beliefs. It's like, we shouldn't see anything to do with religion anywhere. It's almost like there's this weird shift that's happening in society. Do you mind just touching on how we got here? I know you said earlier that it started in the 60s, but where we are today, does that seem like the progression you would have expected to get to where we are? Or?
Well, I think when it comes to the idea of being anti-God, there's no question in my mind that at this point over the last 50 years, maybe 60 years, people have decided that they want to be their own God. And in my opinion, and it's just mine, I do think there's an God sentiment in some of the politics that has been going on, well, since the Burger Court started this whole process. And what I mean by that is, 1804, Thomas Jefferson writes to the Richmond School District. He happened to be in France at the time. And he said, hey, listen, there's got to be a separation of church and state. What he meant was he didn't think the state should promulgate a single religion. And he's talking about denominationalism there, whether it's Anglican or Presbyterian or whatever. But what he wasn't saying, and the Federalist Papers prove it, is it wasn't a government free from religion. In other words, never, ever engaging religion, because religion's been a big part of the American history case for 300 years. It makes no sense to exercise history. I'm against revisionist history. That makes no sense. And as far as I'm concerned, the government shouldn't be establishing religion. But now they're just saying, listen, if it even has like one word in some hallway, it's got to be removed. And that's ridiculous. That I wouldn't feel that way if we were in Islam. That makes no sense. Okay, you got Allah over here in some hallway in the federal courthouse. I don't care. That doesn't bother me as a Christian. That wouldn't even, all he was worried about was the government didn't establish, to the exclusion of everybody else, a religion. And as far as I'm concerned, the Judeo-Christian mores, which, by the way, almost every one of our laws is based on, every one of them are based on the stinking Bible, including things like bankruptcy. Bankruptcy is directly out of the Jewish culture. Jewish law, the year of Jubilee, where you forgive debts after 7 years. That all the bankruptcy stuff is fashioned around that. And my point being is that there's nothing wrong inherently with a society being Judeo-Christian. In fact, as C.S. Lewis once wrote, I don't know if you've ever heard of that guy, but he is ridiculously brilliant. And he said, well, for crying out loud, folks, if you don't want to be a Christian, well, then don't. But please act like one. It's so much better for society. Well, I would say that to the left, especially, that's a true statement today. Caring for life, born or not, euthanasia or not, black, white, red, doesn't matter. The point being is that you care for other people. And that's a biblical model. At the same time, it doesn't mean that you give everything to people. In other words, so that they are stuck in some sort of cycle. That's one of the things that I argue against in some of my classes is the Great Society that Lyndon Baines Johnson started in 1965. What a mess. SSI, all sorts of different things that have caused people to get into the government trough, and they can't get out because it's too lucrative to get out. They can't find a private sector job without being involved in this giveaway thing through SSI and what they call different, anywhere from drug addiction to, there's so many different things. And so you have a whole slew of people that are on the government payroll and they don't even know it. And they don't know their history. So they don't know that that's exactly what happened in 300 AD with the Roman Empire. And 100 years later, the Roman Empire fell because people were so caught up in just being entertained, given everything they want by the government. Yep. And the government did it to make them so they wouldn't rebel. And then pretty soon, nobody wanted to fight for the country when all the Visigoths and the Goths and the Huns were at the door. They couldn't raise an army. So because everybody was fat, fat, dumb, and happy type of thing. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, we're pretty much getting close to that. I mean, in some ways, we're actually worse. I feel like there's a denial of the individual, like you said. Now, when you get rid of God, you get rid of the sanctity of life. You also get rid of the divinity of the individual. And so now we're groups. Now we are classifying. I've never in my life, and I'm 38 years old, believed we get to a point where we would reclassify people to this extent based on the color of their skin, based on their identity, based on their gender. And we've also done away with gender. Gender no longer exists. I mean, we're doing away with every objective truth that humans are individuals and unique, that gender is a real thing, that, all these things, that life is sacred. All these things are being thrown out. And I believe it all stems from that. If you just put God back in the equation, all of that solves itself. But that's why I've noticed something, and this is not an attack on atheists. I believe people could believe whatever they want. It's your choice. But when you don't believe in God, why do so many people who not believe in God feel the need to attack people who do? In other words, there's an anti-God behavior there. Sorry, my dog's making noise, but it's like almost fundamentalist in their belief against God, where if you do believe in God, you are the enemy.
Well, I would agree with that. And I think it comes from the left mindset that says, I want to speak my mind, but I want you to also know my mind so that you adopt it. They don't believe in free speech, not really. And the universities have caused that by this cancel culture thing, which I can't stand. That may be the most dangerous part of the whole thing, is the concept of the idea that because somebody says something that they can't have a job, or because they say something, they've got to be demoted or something. I find that to be outrageous. And as far as the culture goes, where does that lead? If you get rid of every major traditional, I got flies flipping around here.
Yeah, he's hanging out on your hat now.
Figures. Where does it lead? And it only, as far as I can see, it leads to anarchy. And once anarchy happens, historically speaking, there's one of two effects. It either has a hard right rebound, and you have totalitarianism on the right, or you have a hard left rebound, and it's a Marxist approach. And either one of those, you can line up the bodies, not to be scary, but you can line up the bodies from all those kinds of rebounds from this anarchist business. And as far as I'm concerned, the left, by not condemning it immediately, are covering for and giving a leeway to Minneapolis and Portland and Seattle and stuff. And that is a dangerous, slippery slope to go down.
Yeah, it's a travesty in my opinion, the way they're dealing with it and what they're promoting and the values that they're saying are okay in those areas.
Yeah, well, I do think law and order matters to a good society. I don't care if you're socialist. I don't care if you're a capitalist. I don't care if you're some sort of parliamentarian. The bottom line is law and order has to be there. Democracy is made for good men. I don't know if you knew that. You can't put a police guy on every corner. It assumes that men, when I mean men, mankind, is going to have its own internal guidance on morality.
Yes.
And so I don't steal something that I could steal, not because there's not a cop around. It's because it's the wrong thing to do. I don't steal somebody's bike in front of their house, for example. But now, without morality being taught in the home, not taught in school, being hammered in the university, public university, and now in the political thing where they're just saying, well, as Pelosi said about a month ago, well, people will do whatever they do, talking about riots and burning things. I'm going, what? What do you mean they'll do that? No, you as a government needs to quell that. You need to go and stop that and take away the bad guys. I mean, it makes no sense. Where does it lead? All it's going to lead is anarchy.
It leads to anarchy and Marxism. That's where it leads. I mean, I feel like any objective person can look at what's going on and say, yes, it leads to anarchy and Marxism. And they're so hypocritical. I mean, Biden just made blatantly racist statements. He said black people aren't diverse. Very clearly, blatantly said it. A couple weeks ago or a month ago, he said, if you don't vote for him, you ain't black. When he was younger, he said he doesn't want black people in schools because he doesn't want his kids going to a school that would be like a jungle. I mean, he has a history of these things, and yet the left defends him. In other words, I don't even think they care about racism. I don't think it actually matters to them. I think they care about their outcome, and their outcome at this point tends to be the things you're talking about.
The stats would say you're correct. I am no Trump fan. Trump on the 16 primary guys in 2016, he was number 15 on my list. I was rooting for Ben Carson. But that said, ever since he's been in office, he's made the right policy decisions that I think, as a Christian, I can buy. Most pro-life president maybe in history. I mean, he's just been very good. I don't like the brashness, but I've met lots of New York City police officers that are just like him, very, feisty and brash. And they will say things just kind of brushly. But I don't really care about his Twitter stuff. I wish he wouldn't do it. But the bottom line is, the bottom line is the policies matter, and he's done everything I can see from an evangelical perspective that's been good. I don't know why the left wants Biden. I was rooting for that Amy Klobuchar lady from Minneapolis. She seemed to be fairly logical for the nomination. But they didn't go with it. They went. Biden seems to be losing his mind to me.
Sadly, he does. And my grandfather died of dementia. And I think that, again, if you just look at him and you look at the things he says and how he forms sentences and just consistently, he doesn't seem present. His eyes seem glazed over. I don't want to accuse him of, not accuse, but I can't diagnose somebody with dementia. It's not my place. But I can see, I've seen him, on TV for years. And I can see over the past couple of years, there's a very quick decline in his cognitive ability. And I think you have to be in a real state of denial to not see it. And so to me, that's scary that I have a lot of friends again who are like, no, Trump's the one with cognitive disabilities. Trump's the one who's racist. It's just like they default. And I can't have a conversation anymore. I'm like, okay, I get it. You don't like, I'm the same way as you. I thought the way Trump spoke was terrible. There's certain things that he said that really get on my nerves. I think he's made questionable comments. But again, when I look at the policy, I have to be able to say, okay, I'm going to judge this person based on policy. And I do think he puts in policy that even if you're on the left, you cannot deny some of the policies he's put in. The right to try. Sorry, I don't know if you want me to run through them. There's so many.
Well, what I was saying is, in relationship to what you had said about the racism black thing, the bottom line is, I don't think there's been a better president for the black communities ever. He has made unemployment better in the black community. He has reduced many of the crazy leftist things that Obama had put in place. He removed them, and the
Yeah.
Black community is flourishing comparatively, historically, than what they did before. And I think that's one reason why a lot of people are saying that the Black vote is going to be the highest it's ever been for a Republican since 1965.
Well, I mean, the prison reform bill he passed is going to help
Correct.
countless minorities.
Right.
I mean, he just recently passed an executive order to reduce the cost of prescription medication dramatically. No one on the left is covering it, but they know, like, their main argument on the left is that neighborhoods of color have the hardest time with healthcare. Well, he's just done something to drastically, massively help them, especially insulin, which affects the Black community, diabetes at a higher rate.
Right.
Tons of stuff. He just did the Medical Transparency Act, so people could see the transparency. He passed an autism bill. He opened the first task force to investigate Native women who are disappearing and being killed. I mean, he's done tons of stuff that he's allowing Americans now to sue Saudi Arabia, because under Obama, you couldn't sue as a victim of someone who lost your family in 9/11 or whatever it is. You couldn't sue a foreign country. He's allowing that to happen. I mean, everything he's doing is actually things that the left would agree with if a liberal.
If it wasn't Trump doing it. Yeah.
Yes, they would say these are unbelievable. Yes.
Right.
Unprecedented things that he's doing. That no one, the right to try bypassing the FDA so that people could have medication. Right. I mean, it's something that people have been calling for years, and yet he can't get any credit for any of these really monumental passings that he's doing. And so to me, this is just odd. I want to end on one note, just because I want to keep it in a time frame where I know people will watch the whole thing. In your current experience, do you see more people finding God now, or more people stepping away from God? Because I know, as you said, there was like a decline away from God. I'm hoping that now, in the past years, with how extreme it's getting, that people are starting to find God again. I know that kind of helped me find God, and so I'm wondering if you see it.
Well, obviously, I only have a niche into Modesto, and I would say that people are much more open about their personal destiny than ever. COVID has changed some of their mindset, but that's exactly what happened in 9/11 too. When things go really south, people start taking stock as to whether or not they're ready to meet their maker, so to speak. And I do think people are coming back to some sort of religious experience. Where that ends up, we don't know. My friends around the country that are executive pastors are saying the same thing. Our online, on Shelter Cove Live, which is our online stream, has like 40,000, 50,000 viewers every weekend. So, I mean, there's a lot of interest because people are now obviously thinking about that kind of stuff, you know? And by the way, if your viewers ever need some personal chat, you're free to publish my email, my efkiv.
I'll put it down on the bottom of the video.
Yeah, because sometimes people just don't have any place to go. They don't even know a pastor or a Christian or something, and they don't know what God really thinks about certain topic lines. Be happy to help those guys.
Is there anything else you want to add or quickly?
No, the only thing I'd say is that thanks for being somebody who stood up in the midst. That was a very brave. Well, I don't know what the right word is. It was just an honorable thing to do, and I've been glad to talk with you over the last couple of weeks. But you are exactly someone who I'd be proud of to support, not only in the commerce side, but on a personal side. Good for you. Or as my Australian National Police people say, good on you, mate.
Thank you so much. No, that's amazing.
It was nice talking to you.
You
have a good day, and you take care of yourself.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay. All right. See ya.